Normand, your report talks about shifting the emphasis, the energy policy emphasis in Canada from penalizing incumbents, and a carbon tax would be one of those, to making clean options cheaper and ubiquitous. And this is something we've been arguing for at Energy Media for a number of years now. Maybe you could explain it to our viewers.
For a long time, we thought that the energy transition would be more expensive, would be painful. So the idea was, how do you shift the pain by increasing the pain of using fossil fuel so that when you go back to a painful technology, it's less painful than the oil and gas cost. What we see with this transformation at the world level, so I want to tell now Canadians who are listening that we live in a bubble where we don't understand that the world is changing and the technologies based on electricity are now exploding around the world in fields that were dominated by oil and gas until today. And these technologies, because of the way they are produced, because of the service, their efficiency, turn out to be cheaper than the old oil and gas based technologies. So the focus has to change, and we need to understand that this is not a question of making life more difficult for everybody so that they shift to where we want to be. But they need to understand that by shifting, you're economizing, you're saving money, and you're getting better product. And that's really our focus. We need to tell this story, but also we need to design policies and strategies to bring the citizens, the consumer there by helping initially, because even, for example, solar panels are extremely cheap by themselves, but there's no supply chain in Canada, so we don't get them in large enough volumes. People don't know how to install them, so they install 3 a year or 3 a month, so it's very costly. We don't have a lot of expertise. We don't have people who can repair when there's a problem. So we need to build these supply chain to bring costs down and make sure that they come in and dominate. And that's really what we're saying. Let's show that these can be more interesting than the previous one, oil and gas technologies, and let's shift the focus. And this has to be done wisely, strategically, sector by sector, market by market.
Normand, we've made the argument here that, in fact, Canada has a 20th century view of energy in the 21st century. We're behind. And we've also argued that low cost, clean, and reliable electricity is essentially the foundation of a 21st century economy. And we see that in Asia in absolute spades. And that economy is competitive on the global stage. It is lower cost and it's better. It provides better products and services for Canadians. So that's the potential for it. And the gap between what's happening at the global stage, where this technology now is the cheaper, better version, and our perception of it, how do we bridge that gap?
I mean, this is not a perception, it's the reality. Okay? If I go today and I want to get a heat pump in Canada, it's likely to be very expensive. It's likely to be difficult. I have to fight with my electricity distributor who says, well, I don't have enough electricity. I might have to change the bulb. So that's the reality. It's not a perception. And it's important to understand. We need to change the reality, not the perception. And for this, again, we might need to say, how do I subsidize the people who are installing these heat pumps to make sure that I force them to become more competitive, to I force them to be lowering their price, their margin, because they know they'll have a market. If I guarantee them, if I push them in the right direction, if I stop allowing new gas lines, for example, all this means that I can support. If I make sure that the distributor have the electricity capacity to support this. So it's not something simple. These costs are hidden at multiple ways. Regulation is a cost in terms of doing things. So we have to understand where the barriers are. We understand where we can act the most efficiently to lower costs and to make sure we benefit from these technologies. And I would say Canada has a 20th century view of energy, but also a 20th century view of economy. We think by building pipelines is a way of the future. That's not the case. It's the way of the past. Okay, let's build new horse carts, and maybe we'll be rich. But that's not how it works.
Your report makes another point that I think is very important, and we saw this play out in the consumer carbon tax here in Canada. Economists agreed that it was a good policy. Okay, fair enough, but it didn't receive much political and communication support. And so the opponents to the carbon tax hijacked that conversation, and then now it's been repealed. And your report says that you have to manage the politics of these new policies, create constituencies in the various regions and in the provinces to support those policies. You can't just enact them and then walk away and expect that they're going to be successful. They have to be actively managed. I couldn't agree more. Maybe you could explain a little bit more.
First, the economist said it was the best approach. Okay, clearly they were wrong. Okay, it's not. What is the importance, and that's what we're coming back in our report, is the price comparison. If it's not with the tax, let's work somewhere else and let make sure that the price of the new technologies are better. The approach that was pushed by the economists is again a punitive approach. Let's punish people and they might move. Okay, what we're saying is that, and we see it doesn't hold. And we've seen this problem elsewhere in the world when it's used in isolation from much more positive carrots and more positive view of this transformation. Because otherwise, and we've seen it in Canada, it just brings people against. As long as the tax doesn't hurt, it doesn't matter. But the day it hurts, well, really it doesn't work. It's politically unpalatable. And let's focus on getting these technologies at the right prices. And really, it's exciting because at the same time, it means that you're training people. You have a vision which is positive. How do I get people in better jobs, in the job for tomorrow, and jobs that require more understanding? How do I shift them? How do I bring people to control and benefit from these new technologies? So this is a very positive message that can be used also to how can I make sure that my industry, my economy has the knowledge and capacity and maybe some even intellectual property that is competitive in today's world.
You said something that I want to follow up on, and that is you need some hope. And I attended a conference on narrative about 6, 7 years ago, and the professor from Stanford made the point that if you want to push back against a negative narrative, the only thing that works is hope and optimism. So if you want to argue for, you say, look, we need to shift gears here in Canada. We need to, be more plugged into the global economy and trends that are there. You can't cast it in negative terms. You have to give Canadians a hope and optimism that if we go in that direction, our lives will be better, we'll be more competitive, our prosperity will be assured. They will buy that. Now, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. But not only give them hope, you have to deliver. And we have a lot of problem in Canada delivering. That's a few things. That means also we need to focus on the right message. We've been focusing way too much on the oil and gas industry, forgetting the positive side of decarbonizing and transforming the rest of the economy. So our paper is about, let's focus on the rest. Let's ignore, even if you don't talk about oil and gas, let them do what they want. Let's then move forward. Let's deliver on this transformation. And let's understand, let's stop talking about, I would say, nonsense. There's been a lot of also insistence on the environmental side about the fact that moving to clean energy gives you as much job, as much economy, as much benefits as the oil and gas. That's not true, okay? We cannot, as we move in this energy transition, we cannot replace one energy source by another and remain rich. We have to use these other transformation, these electro technologies, these high impact technologies, the high value added technologies to be able for Canada to be able to remain competitive. And the focus on let's build a few windmills and solar panels and that gives as much revenues as oil and gas, it's wrong. And I think We need to face the truth. We need to understand where the challenges are. And instead of saying those are challenges, let's avoid them, let's head them, face them head on and use this to move forward. There are unknown. How do we handle an electric grid that is totally decarbonized in Canada with the winter, with the challenges of the peak in the winter? I don't have the answer, but developing this answer technologically, software, and thinking strategically is a way for Canada to become, now, to put itself on the international scene.
Yes, and the in Canada, we often are when we talk about clean energy, we talk about the supply side.
Yeah.
How are we going to generate electricity differently? Well, we already have, 77% of our, actually 84% of our grid comes from renewables. This is not the pressing issue is not on generating more electricity. It's about, as you say, it's on the demand side, the devices that do work cheaper, better, and more reliable. So electric vehicles plus batteries. So it's
But we
electric
need more
motor and battery.
electricity. We need to double
Yes.
down. And when you look at the plants in Canada, most of them are not aligned with what's needed. Most of them are behind. So will we have to wait for a crisis? I don't know. But this is a challenge to me because we are not moving at the right speed, but this is not sufficient. And that should be normal in some way. As citizens, as consumer, we should not have to worry about will I have enough electricity. Okay, we pay no CEOs of big utilities to do that job for us. They have a bit of problem doing it, but in some way, I think there's also an issue of people not taking the responsibility because the messages are murky. But if we are very clear about where the demand will be, then these utilities can go back to the regulator and say, this is the demand that's coming. I can justify borrowing $50 billion and doing these investments.
Normand, this is fascinating. Again, I highly recommend the report if any of the viewers want to read it for themselves. The link is in the description. So thank you very much for this.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for your interview.